You can count me in? Oh, we're live. Hello. Welcome everyone to, what are we, week 5 of UPCS? Week 6. Jeez, that's crazy. Today we have Logan Senjoff here to give a talk about a very brief overview of your entire career path. Logan is an ex-student of UPCS, an active contributor, so we welcome you back again.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Without further ado, Logan.
Hello. Oh, geez, that is quite bad. All right, let's get into this straight away. So, very brief overview of your entire career path. Before we kick into this, who the hell am I? Why can I even talk about this? My name's Logan. I'm Senjoff on Slack. Hit me up. I'm always ready to chat because God knows it can't shut me up. I was the engineer #1 and current principal engineer at a place called Cubiko. We do business intelligence for general practice doctors. Basically, we take their data and make pretty graphs out of it. I'm big on functional programming, but I'm not going to talk about that today because frankly no one cares right now. And otherwise, I'm a big drummer and a big game master, and I plan to do both of them to a possibly fanatical level, probably more than is healthy. How did I get where I am today as principal engineer? Came to uni the first time, flunked out because I didn't know what the hell I was doing. So went away, got my head together, came back, and then did the second time round, did well enough. First job, went from junior to a senior operations architect in a year and a half. Title inflation is real, don't read too much into it, but I did have a dozen casuals under me at the time, and I was basically running the infrastructure and deployment infrastructure for the place I was at. Then after that I left there, went to a consulting firm called Agenic, where they put me in as an intermediate because they didn't believe I was senior. 6 months later they put me in as senior. Then after that, and then from there, Cubiko was a startup spin-off of there, and so I went there, engineer #1, built the whole product, and I'm still there today after 5 years or something like that. So that's where I'm at the moment. Went up to CTO, did a brief stint in CTO, stepped down, but I'll talk about that a bit later. So, on the menu today, we are talking about a very general idea of levels of seniority. This is senior, and I use seniority in quotes because I've seen some people working in a senior position that are no better than a junior because they're idiots, and I've seen some juniors who should be seniors just by how good they are. I'm only talking about kind of the software engineer flavor. I'm not going to go heavily into any other sort of branching because you get product, you get management, you get all that sort of stuff. I'll mention those, but I'm not going heavily into that. That's not what I'm talking about. And generally the job evolution, what your job looks like at different levels. Because right now, if you don't have a job in the industry, you probably have no idea what it looks like. So I'll give it a think of that. What I'm not talking about how to get your first job. There's enough other talks about that. I don't care about that today. And this is probably not going to be academically correct. I'm not an academic. I don't do heaps of study or reading. So it's not going to be anything like that. It's just how I see it and my general model of how it works. So the general levels we're looking at. So student, where most of you are now. Grad, not really a level, but it's a milestone we should probably talk about at some point on the way. Then you have junior, which is roughly up to 2 years in industry. Then intermediate, 2 to 5 years. Senior is roughly 5 years plus. And then you have principal and CTO, and these are kind of more specialized roles or specific parts above there. You can get to senior and you can stay senior the rest of your career, you'll be right, but these are extra parts I want to kind of talk about. All right, student. As a student, what skills do you have? What skills do you have? No? No? Do you know nothing?
I can calculate 2 strings.
Sorry?
I can calculate 2 strings.
Correct. Well, as a student coming in, you probably can't even do that. But if I say, oh crap, I missed my last bus because friggin' public transport as it is, 20 kilometers home, I walk 5 kilometers an hour. How long does it take to get home? 4 hours, pretty simple. You know how to do basic maths. You know how to listen to a problem. You can understand the problem given to you. So, you have skills, but what actually is a skill? Like programming, obviously a skill. Math is a skill. Language is a skill. You can do things with that's what you call a skill. Instruments, you can play an instrument, classify that as a skill. You can play sport, that's a skill. So the question is, what is not a skill? And I want to post a thing that basically everything you do is a skill. Everything. Like, maybe you can find some random little side parts, but stop being pedantic. Basically, everything you do is a skill. Things like how you communicate. You communicate your ideas to people. That is a skill. Socializing. Socializing is a skill. There's a whole heap of people in tech who call themselves introverts that I don't think are introverts. They just don't know how to socialize, so it's a huge amount of effort for them to actually talk to people. Learning is a skill. You had to learn how to study. You can get better at learning. Reading is a skill. I mean, you obviously know reading is a skill from the baseline, but then what levels, there's more things you can do with it. There's a lovely book called How to Read a Book. And you should read that book, and then you read that book again with the way that you now know how to read a book. And even at the top level, it mentions a thing called syntopical reading, which is when you read not just a book, but everything around its subject, and gives you a framework of how to read everything about a subject. So you can get better at reading to levels you probably didn't realize. And you have solving. How do you solve a problem? Do you know how to solve a problem? I mean, you can instinctively do it, but have you actually sat down and thought about how you solve a problem? Metacognition, good stuff, would recommend it. Right, back to it. As a grad, so this isn't really a level, but this is kind of a milestone along the way we should talk about. So you've graduated, you haven't got your first job yet. I hope you've got a job lined up, but let's say you haven't got your first job yet. So what can you do as a grad? Or what should you hopefully be able to do? One, code. You can create things with code. You can, from baseline, say, I want to build this thing. Okay, let me go do it. You can probably do it in a couple of languages. One programming paradigm, maybe two. More likely it's either object-oriented, most likely it's object-oriented and imperative, a bit of Python, maybe a bit of Java. That's what you can do there. Developer tooling. You at least have a basic understanding of how Git works. And you know that if you go, okay, I make a change, I add files, I git commit, you can follow those instructions to add more things to your repo. And maybe you can go back and you can check stuff out. You probably don't have a full understanding of how it works. You probably can't go and find the differences between this workflow and this workflow, trunk-based versus feature branch versus whatever. And you can communicate, hopefully, in a technical language. You can communicate to other techs. Hopefully at this point you've been able to read specs coming in, which are written in technical language, and you can do that. But also you've been having some group projects where you can talk to other technical people. So hopefully by this stage you can communicate. You can apply your skill of being able to communicate in a technical language. So, but what do those little words mean, creating that? Well, there's a thing called Bloom's taxonomy, and this is a fairly well accepted idea of how you teach something. And it's worded in ways of, after this activity, the student will be able to remember something, will be able to understand something, will be able to create something with that. And it has the 6 levels and assumes that you can do the previous level, but you must be able to do the previous level before you can do the next level. But I like to put a 7th one in there, to grok. To grok is to understand, but if you hit create within a discipline or a skill, you can do everything within that skill, or roughly. But to grok is to be able to understand enough that you can take that skill and you can combine it with other skills. And this is a next level which you kind of don't really think about till you start doing it. I've seen many people who can churn out code all day, but they have absolutely no understanding what the hell they just wrote and how it's going to fit into something else. So, you're a junior now. You have been working roughly 6 months. And what the hell do you do as a junior? And roughly, what you'll usually be doing is you go into work and you get a list of tasks and you pull off the first task. And it's going to be well scoped and it's going to tell you as much as it possibly can about it, and it's hopefully a day's worth of work. You're going to have someone there, hopefully, who is supporting you constantly that you can always keep asking questions to, because you're a junior, you still don't know much, you're still figuring out what's going on. Not to mention, you have to figure out how the rest of the system works. So you'll have someone there who's giving you lots of support. And you're generally thinking in the time scale of hours. You're not really thinking much more than maybe your 8-hour day. Maybe you're pushing it to 2 days. But generally you're just thinking in hours. Every bit of work you get is small, it's short. So what skills do you actually have at this point? Code, still creation. You probably can't grok things yet, but you've got enough. You're starting to get comfortable with that. Your dev tooling. After 6 months, a year or so, you've probably started messing around with GitHub pipelines or whatever you're using there. You've probably been messing around with the ticketing system. So you're starting to play with it and modify the dev tooling. And also problems. I mean, you should have this anyway, but the skill of actually understanding a problem is separate from solving a problem. Because at this point, you should be able to understand problems a bit better. We'll get back to that in a bit. I want to bring up the concept of autonomy, because as we start to go higher, you will get more autonomy. Obviously, more autonomy, more responsibility and all that. But this is the SFIA, I think, Skills Framework for Internet Age, something like that. 7 levels of autonomy. And I want to point out specifically that midpoint at 4. At 4, you are roughly getting about the same amount of support as you give. You are generally directed to do a task, and cool, you're told, go do this thing, and you should be able to do most of it yourself. This is not saying that you're put in the corner and told to do things, it's more that, hey, this has come up, I need you to deal with this. Okay, cool, I'll go deal with this. Hey, there's a thing here I don't understand. I will now go and find the information, whether it's with the person or some other information. I will go look for it because I'm self-directed. As a junior, you're sitting around level 3. You should be at least somewhat autonomous, but you're still going to be receiving a lot of support. When you hit that intermediate point, you want to be at level 4. You want to be just self-directed. I can grab this, I can make it happen. Above that, you should be working at high levels of autonomy, but it's not guaranteed. As a senior, there's a lot of seniors that still just work at level 4. And I've seen intermediates who are working at level 6 because they've just taken a thing and they've owned it and they're running with it and they're moving the whole company in a certain direction. So with that, this next concept of impact. Every level of seniority you go up, you should be having an order of magnitude more impact than the previous. Impact does not mean the amount of code that you are churning out. Impact is specifically the change that you're making. Above a certain point, the amount of work that you can do solo, you're limited. The whole thing of like 100 times engineer, 100 times more code, cool. Still not as good as what a good senior can do when they're leading a bunch of people. Because they can multiply everyone by 10 or 100 or whatever. So remember, as you go up, that is one of the things you need to be looking to do if you want to rise. So, as an intermediate, well, you're doing kind of the same thing you were doing as a junior. You just have less support, more autonomy. You're running with that. You get more responsibility on the problems you're given. You pull out a ticket and you go, this is no longer a 4-hour thing that someone's looked at and got all the edge cases out. Now it's, I'm looking at 3-4 days of work for this. Okay. And I don't understand that, and I don't understand that. And I'm pretty sure the guy who gave it to me doesn't understand that. Crap, now I've got to go and figure out what's going on here. And yeah, you're thinking in days usually. Maybe a week, maybe 2 weeks. That's kind of where your thoughts are at. So, skill-wise, code, maybe you're not a grok yet. That's okay, but I want to point out something here. At this point, code is still a valuable skill, but it's not your only valuable skill you should be developing. Your main skills that you should be developing is dealing with problems, defining your problems. When you get given a problem, it's no longer, okay, everything about the problem is here. It's, crap, I don't think this design works. Did we have a designer look at this? You've given me this thing, you say, I think it should look this way. No, that sucks, let me go talk to them again. Now let me go talk to them. And let's go talk to design, because I think design wants to look at this better. And then we have to care about the technical bit. And that's the other thing you need to be developing, is your communication. Who are you talking to? Because as a junior, you're probably just talking to other engineers. You're still communicating in technical speak. Easy, you've done that before. But then suddenly you have to talk to designers. Designers do not speak tech. Nobody speaks tech except techs. So if you're talking to a designer, you need to learn how to talk design. If you're talking to product, you need to go learn how to talk to product. The only people who are going to be able to speak your language is people who used to be techies. really looking at specializations, because you only have so many hours in a day, you only have so much of a skill set. So where do you want to start specializing? Do you want to be doing infrastructure? Do you want to be a data engineer? The two are somewhat related, but in a lot of ways they're not, because data is all about getting data from over there to here in the right format. And there's a whole rabbit hole of stuff you'll go down for that. Do you want to be back-end and you're just sitting on the server and the data's already there and you're serving it up to someone? Do you want to be a web developer? Web is different from design. There's a concept of front of the front end and back of the front end, because nowadays front ends have so much logic in them that guess what? You need a techie to deal with that, because the designers aren't going to be doing that. Are you going to call yourself full stack? You think you're going to be across all of that? I call you a bullshit. Most likely if you're full stack, you're going to be a little bit of infra, you're going to be a little bit of design, and you're going to be a lot of back end and web. Full stack is a lie, you're not doing full stack, you're doing parts of the stack. Firmware, do you want to go into firmware? If you want to go into firmware, you should be thinking about that right now, where you want to be going, because it's going to be difficult to pivot from a web developer into firmware. It's not going to happen too well. Product versus consulting. These are different kind of approaches. Product is any long-lived product. It doesn't have to be specifically in startups. It can also be just any long-running company. It's a cement mixing company that has IT stuff that needs software. Cool. It's a long-running project that you're going to be sitting on for many years if you stay there. Versus consulting, which is a company says, I have a problem that needs fixed. I am willing to pay 4 times cost rate in order to get people in to fix this problem now. Any tech debt, we don't care. It can get punted down the line. We're paying for you to do this now. Which way do you want to go? Because there's a question to think about. And the last one I'm going to put here is, how close do you want to be to the client? Because a lot of people in here will say, I don't want to be too close to the client, but maybe you do. You'll find out as you go along, solving problems can be a lot easier when you can talk directly to the person who has the problem. But again, I personally think of my clients as internal. So customer success, design, product, those are the ones who are my customers, and then their customers go out. So figure out where you want to be to the people who are actually paying the money. So that's an intermediate, but let's think a little bit about, okay, you're a student at the moment, how the hell do you get there? Well, firstly, you can think about one step ahead. So as a student, you're just thinking about getting to junior. Okay, cool. So what does that mean I need to do? An important point here is that you will never get put into a role unless you're already at least halfway there and you look like you'll be there soon. So there's a lot of places that will have a full skills matrix. Some of them will say you will not get a promotion to this role unless you meet everything. Most of them will say you'll get a promotion if you meet 90% of this, and there's a couple of these that look like you'll meet in the near future. If you're operating at a junior level, you're not becoming an intermediate. And I know it sounds dumb, but I have to point this out. Then you should probably actually be thinking 2 steps ahead, because a lot of these skills that you're looking at, intermediate and senior, aren't something you develop over a couple of years. They're something you'll develop over 10 years before you can get there. So you have to start thinking earlier about, how do I get to that? And I want to point this out too, because especially going from junior and you're looking ahead to senior, you can be saying to your like your immediate manager or whatever, that in 5 years' time, I want to be doing this. And so long as you keep reminding about it, quite often they'll keep an eye out for opportunities for you, and they'll go, oh, you want to do, hey, he was wanting to do this, they're looking for oh, you want to jump over onto this. It's not guaranteed to happen, but it's a great way to get those opportunities, because it is likely to happen if they actually care about you. And I want to bring this third point, I want to bring this back to the whole point of impact. Remember, as you go up, you're meant to have more impact. And it's very difficult to do that just with code. Beyond a certain point, beyond intermediate, you really start looking at becoming a leader. Leadership is not management. Managers are not leaders by default. They like to think they are, but they're not. But you want to be leading something. Is it leading people? Well, hopefully you're doing a bit of that. Is it leading technical stuff? Because you can be a leader in a technical domain without having to lead the people there. Well, without concentrating on leading the people there. If you're looking at 1 year out, our technical domain here should look like this. We need to completely refactor this whole section here, which means this, this, this. That's leadership still. You're taking the lead on something and hopefully bringing people with you. So senior, we get to senior. This is, you've been doing stuff for 5 years, roughly on average, I think. And at this point, it stops going from, oh, this is 4 or 5 weeks worth of work, and just says, right, here you go, it's 4 months. We think, maybe, possibly. Figure it out. Okay, how the hell do you do that? And that's something that hopefully you've been learning as you come up, but at this point, you are now leading a large initiative for months at a time. You are now probably having to talk to maybe a dozen people at least to even figure out what the hell the problem is before you've even broken it apart enough that individual people can work on it. And this is what I'm saying, at this point you really need to start hitting that leadership stuff because that's what you'll be doing for a lot of it so you can have that impact. So what skills do you have? Code, at this point you need to be able to grok what the hell you're doing because you're coming in with problems out of left and right field and you need to be sitting there going, okay, cool. Right, I need to apply code to this. Do I have to apply code to it? Maybe. Hopefully you can get rid of half of it without applying code because code sucks, don't do it. More code, more problems. Then this is the point where problems, you need to be able to understand how to define a problem. And yes, you have to define a problem in a certain domain, but you need to be able to define a problem, create those problems for other people to be able to solve, and define them in a way that there's at least as little confusion as possible. Leadership, talked about that, that's what you're doing here. You need to be doing this. You're probably still doing code, most likely at this point, but it doesn't guarantee that you're doing code here. A lot of your time is probably spent talking to people at that stage. I hope you didn't get into software because you thought you wouldn't talk to people much. And company technical direction. Likely there is someone above you that has said, in 4 years we want to be here, or in 2 years we want to be here. And now you're looking and going, oh, I was going to do it this way, but since he said that, I need to move. I need to steer which way this is going to try and meet that. It's that thing of you're starting to think, okay, they're thinking months in advance. I'm starting to get there. And there's some specializations that you start to hit. There's more than this, obviously, but so you have project lead, which is kind of what I was talking about earlier, where you just get a big thing and now you're managing this whole project. Cool. But I don't count this as people focused because you are very specifically on a task. You're on this thing and you're guiding this project to an end. But it can overlap with people roles. Quite often you get project leads who are also team leads who are people focused as well. But depends on where you work and depends on how it works. Otherwise, people-focused stuff. You have management. You can go from tech into management, you become an engineering manager, something like that, and your day-to-day is worrying about the people in your team and helping the people in your team work better. Which is different from product, who really still care about people, but they care about the customers. They are there to figure out what the customers want and then do that in a way that communicates it inwards. Which one do you want to do? If you want to go people-focused, don't know. You figure out if you want to deal with people that much. Right. On to something a bit of a different thing. Cybersecurity. Cybersecurity sounds cool. It sucks. It's so hard. Before you can get in, so there are almost no junior positions in cybersecurity. Almost none. Anyone saying it, maybe you're lucky and you'll find one, but almost none of them. Because in order to be able to really get a job in cybersecurity, before you can do it, this is a test I like to use. Can you, if you're playing a game and you hit a key to move, can you describe every single thing that happens before the thing on your screen, before your character starts moving on the screen? Everything, and don't give me the thing of, yes, it's client side, piss off. Everything that goes all the way to the server and comes back. How's the network request look? How do you think it processes on their server? What's the CPU architecture look? What's happening in your keyboard? Because you basically have to have this minimum level of understanding before you can really look at things and say, how do I break this? If I want to reverse the position that person walks when they hit a key, How do I do that? At which points can I do that and why? If you want to go into red team stuff where it's the cool stuff, the really cool stuff where you break into things, you have to not only be able to do that, but have at least one segment that you are close to the top of the world in. You have to be an expert in at least one thing. Maybe it's firewalls, maybe it's CPU architecture, because you have to be able to understand that better than almost anyone to be able to break it. And on the other side, you have blue teaming, where you have to have a high level of technical aptitude, plus you have to have a lot of social aptitude, because at least half of your work is trying to teach the people internally that, no, stop using your password that you used on the same site that got hacked 5 years ago. They know this password, stop using it for your work account. And the last bit of here is skill decay, is that your skills decay incredibly fast in security. In general software, not so much. There are people who are still programming in COBOL because places need it. That's like 50, 60 years old now. The skills do not decay very quickly, but in security they do. So I'm not saying don't go into cybersecurity, but if you're going to, you better be living and breathing it. Right, with that, let's talk about principal engineers. So, as I said earlier, as a senior, you can go your whole career as a senior. A principal engineer is generally more of a specialized task. They have a mandate that's outside of the usual thing. Again, leader, not manager. You've got leadership over something, whether it's people, whether it's a project, whatever it is. At this point, you need to be thinking months. You cannot be doing this unless your brain has hit the point where you're thinking months in advance. There is a lovely site called Starfenge, which I can link after this, but it generally lists 4 archetypes. You have a tech lead, a technical lead that kind of like, if a project lead has thing over a project, a tech lead has all of the project leads underneath them. They are across and shepherding a giant domain of stuff in a certain direction and shepherding the people to work a certain way. Architect is kind of similar, but it's far more focused on the tech itself. So they will have a system or multiple systems under it that they understand every single little bit of that system and how it works. Maybe not down to the code level, but each module, how it works together, how this system fits into all the other systems that the company is running. You won't see this except in very large companies where they can afford to have someone who just coordinates this, but it exists. You have the right hand. The right hand is basically someone who an executive has said, you work for me now. You are outside of the regular hierarchy. I'm going to tell you to go do something over there, and you have all my power to go do that thing. You have the executive's power, you have their authority to go make things happen in a space. Quite rare, but a scary person to deal with if you've ever met them. And then finally, the solver. And that's kind of what I do these days. I don't have any specific task list of people saying, this is your thing for the next few months. I float. Who needs me today? Product needs me to do a thing over there. CS needs me to do a thing there. Engineers need me to help on a scope or to help with some code and talk about them. I go in, I solve problems, hopefully problems before they start really existing, or when they're little and small. So that's kind of what I do at this point. One more aside. Neurodivergence. Software is full of fucking weirdos. Whether that's because we attract them, because we create them, because you're not meant to make rocks think, or we just recognize mental illnesses more. My bet is on the first one, honestly, because it's just full of weirdos, so it attracts weirdos. But there's something that should be said, which some people don't think about, is that if a company has a choice between someone who's neurodivergent and someone's not, and all things are equal, they're going to take the one who's not. A company is not going to cater to your weird brain tics unless you're worth it. But on the other hand of that, if you can work with your weird brain tics, you can make yourself much more employable. Like I am, in case you couldn't tell by the way I speak, I am hyperactive as fuck. So consequently, I'm in a solo role. I jump between tasks very quickly. It works on my Yes, very short attention span, but it means that I can go bang, bang, bang and do 4 things in a day and not a problem. So figure out how your brain works, and this comes right back to how you solve problems. That you should be thinking how you solve problems. How can you best find a role where the way your brain works helps you solve problems? Because that's what you're getting paid for at the end of the day. Right, and there's CTO. CTO is probably the biggest jump from anything here. You are no longer thinking in just weeks or months. You think years. You think 3-4 years ahead of time, and then quite often have to go, well, I'm thinking of that, but right now today I have to think of what's happening right now today. And then I'll go into a meeting where I have to think 3 weeks in advance, then a few months, then back to today, and then I have a strategy meeting where I think in years. You have to be able to zoom up and zoom down very quickly. There's kind of a couple of different domains for CTOs. One is internal, one is external. So if you're an internal CTO, it's kind of what it sounds like. You face inwards. You're doing everything to shepherd inwards technical direction. On the alternative, there's external facing CTOs who are basically sales. They get pulled out to all of their big clients to go sell big contracts. Because there's a lot of places that will not think that you respect them unless you pull out the other C-suite and say, yes, okay, we're here, please sign this multi-million-dollar contract. And when you start hitting there, there's a weird thing that happens, is that you get a seat at the table. And as a senior, or as someone high up, you get asked things from the C-suite and you go, yeah, that sounds about right. And you think you've got knowledge of what's going on internally. You have no clue what's going on. By the time it hits you, it's already been discussed, it's basically been decided on, and you're just there to either rubber stamp it, or hopefully you're there as a last port of check before it goes out to everyone. And it's kind of a bit scary the first time that happens. Because also right now you realize everything is on your shoulder. That autonomy thing I said earlier, you are at level 7. You cannot operate at CTOs less than that because everything is on your shoulders. Everything that goes wrong in your domain comes back to you. If there's a data breach all the way down there because of a malicious actor, cool, your problem. It's your screw up. You didn't fix the process up enough. It's not to say you'll be fired for everything that happens like that, but it is your responsibility to deal with. And what skills do you have? Note I haven't listed code there because you're probably not going to be doing much code at this level. At this point, you're still solving problems, but you're solving problems with people underneath you and maneuvering an entire company to solve big problems that are years long. So yeah, you need to fully understand how leadership works. You need to understand how leadership works within the technical domain. You need to understand every little bit about that because, again, your impact is gigantic. And if you do the wrong thing, guess what? The whole company goes off the cliff. And company technical direction, same thing. That's what you're setting, that's what you're doing most of your days. My time as CTO. So I was there for about a year, stepped down afterwards. Part of which, my skills were not good enough. Leadership-wise, not good enough, probably not looking at long enough timescale. It happened probably earlier than it should have, so be it. So I went into the role, not good enough, stepped down a year later. Also because I was doing multiple jobs because they hadn't had a chance to backfill me properly. So I'm doing 55, 60-hour weeks, and I'm having to go from thinking in years for a strategy meeting to now thinking, oh God, this needs to get out today because this is broken. And there's a communication barrier. And this is something that I did not expect. The moment that you get a C in front of your name, regular rank and file stop talking to you, completely. Rank and file, just like engineers in general. They will stop talking to you, they'll stop bitching to you. They'll still be polite to you and talk to you if you ask them questions, but they stop coming forward and saying, hey, I've got this problem, because they think you're too busy. It happened within a week of me getting that letter in front of my name, and 2 days after I stepped down, someone came and said, oh, Logan, you're not CTO anymore. I can bitch to you about this problem. You had a year to complain to me about it. Why did you do it before? Oh, you're too busy. Okay, sure. So we don't have a CTO now, we have a head of development because that's the C title. No, don't do it. Or at least don't do it unless you've got a massive layer of middle management there to deal with it. And stepping down honestly went better than than it should have sometimes. I said specifically, hey, I can't do this, I'm doing this, this is my reasoning for going down. They said, give us a week to figure stuff out. Cool, step down, not a problem. Everyone was actually quite happy with it. I was surprised I wasn't doing either job too well, but anyway. So yes, that's what kind of a CTO looks like. I can talk about that a bit more later, but yeah, good fun times. There's the whole stack. So, now I have some takeaways from this. What I want you to take away. The evolution of your job is that it starts off with you just solving code problems. You get given a problem that's obviously a code problem. And then you move up from there and you're just solving problems generally. That's what your next level is. You're just solving problems. Yes, you're solving with code most of the time, but there's some problems that you solve that have no code involved, and probably many of them. The more problems you can solve without code, the better off you'll be. And then at some point, you start scaling that solving. I watched a talk by the Facebook CTO about 5 years ago, and he was detailing out one of his tools, because this was after 4 years of them doubling their leadership team each year. Each year they were doubling it. They went from 200 to 400 to 800 to 1,600 managers. How do you scale that? And his answer to it was a decision tree. And he had documented over pages and pages of this giant tree of, I have to make a decision. How do I make that decision? And he expected every single manager coming in and every single member of the leadership team coming in to read, understand, and memorize that document. Or at least, if not memorize it, get the general gist of it. Because his thinking is that, well, if you should not be punished for making the correct decision. So what is the correct decision? Let me make you up a decision tree. If you follow this and something bad happens, we won't hold you responsible for it because you made the correct decision at the time. If you deviate from it, you better have a good reason. So it's just an interesting thought of that's how you scale up that ridiculous impact you need to have as C-suite. And generally, remember, each level is an order of magnitude more responsibility, more time scale that you're thinking of, and more impact. And that's the big thing to really think about. Each level is more impact. So if you're wanting to rise up fast, start looking for those opportunities to make more impact, make a bigger impact. Automation is great. Look at that early on. Figure out how you can automate and cut time out. Everyone will thank you for it. Like, oh, you're doing things here. Let's see how we can move you up fast. With that, I just want to leave you with a small quote that I particularly love. It's that I am not a product of my circumstances, I am a product of my decisions.
The use of decision trees as a bold choice, isn't there a risk of setting up the inflexible management structure then?
So, inflexible management structure because of decision trees. Yes, but there's a reason why there's a specific point of if you break it, you'd better have a good reason for it. And this, I would like to point out that this wasn't like a small document. This was hundreds of pages and all built into this giant tree graph. Because every time someone had to break it, they would sit there and they'd talk about it and go, was this the correct decision? So it was a very living document as it went on. So generally, yes, I understand what you're getting at, but in this case, I think it was a good thing. So if you look at Agile, the whole point of Agile is the constant feedback and re-looking at what you're doing. And you're meant to have constant retrospectives to go, were we doing something wrong there? How can we do this better? And this was heavily managed by that every time something had to change, they would review it and then go, should this go in there? So if you want to break it, you can do that, but you wear the cost if you break it and things go wrong. Does that kind of get it? Yeah. Other questions? Yes, another one.
So there's a principle of decentralized organizing, sort of talking about decision trees, that you can have an org chart instead of having the prescriptive, where like this is the structure, you can have a descriptive and actually map out people's roles as they change. And I think this was kind of how Valve did it when they structured
Early
their
days,
company.
yep.
Yeah, because it was completely fluid internally, people shift around entirely. And so we're developing like an extreme kind of decentralized bottom-up leadership versus, say, I don't know, maybe like Facebook or Google, if you're conventional, much more hierarchical structure. How would you compare those? There are pros and cons, obviously.
I'm not management. I can speculate all day about decentralized versus centralized structures and prescriptive versus descriptive, but I'm not management. I try not to be because I'd say I can rub people the wrong way sometimes. Other people are better managers than I am. I'm very much focused on the technical. So if you want to talk more about that, I can put you in touch with some Scrum leaders who would be more than happy to talk to you for days about it.
So most of us here are like undergrads. What do you think our mind should be when looking for companies like for grad and internships and stuff?
This is not about how to get a job, but what do you want to be as an intermediate engineer?
Not sure yet.
Cool, then I can't help you. There's a general concept of life is, okay, so let me pose a question to you. Do you have a plan for where you want to be in 5 years?
More or less.
Cool, what is it? You don't even know what you want to be as an intermediate engineer.
Well, going to back-end development, that's it.
You want to be a back-end engineer. Cool. Well, now you've got your answer. You look for places that do a good amount of back-end stuff. I can't really go much more than that about you figuring out where you want to be, and then you can start looking for that. If you want to really dig into it, then I can talk to you more about it later, or we can have a career counseling session if you so desire. But I can't, you have to figure out what you want, and then you can plan from there. For those who don't kind of know what the 5-year plan, so there's a concept of a 5-year plan, which is you have a general goal for where you want to be in 5 years. And now that you know that, you go to 2 years. Where do I want to be in 2 years so I can hit that 5 years? And then you go 1 year, and then 6 months, and then 3 months, then 1 month, and then 1 week. And you should be able to plan out from that 5 years what you're doing tomorrow. So if you know where you want to be in 5 years or 2 years, whatever, you can trace back to today and figure out, crap, what do I need to do? I need to go look for companies that are doing this thing.
Fair. Sounds fair.
I know it's a bit of a smart-ass answer, but I can't really give much more than that. Hang on. Yep.
I know you said you didn't want to talk about functional programming, but I'm still quite curious about what you think about that other.
The short version is that our product is working on a closure stack, front end and back end, with a DBT stack behind it, which is pretty good about going input outputs. So I love my closure, I love my functional programming, I love immutability most of all because there's entire classes of problems I haven't had to think about for probably 5 years. But otherwise I don't want to talk to, ask me afterwards and I can talk your ear off about it, but that's not what this talk is about. So grab me afterwards, I'm more than happy to chat.
How do you start thinking more long term as one of the big skills that you are saying progresses?
Where do you want to be in 5 years?
Data analyst.
Cool. Where do you want to be in 2 years?
Hopefully doing AI machine learning.
Cool. Then you're already on the way. And that's basically what it is. It's just looking at where you want to be, planning that out. Maybe you plan it out in more detail than what you've currently got now, but it's just, I have a vision for where I want to be. Pop, 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 pop. This is what I need to do today to be there in 5 years. And actually, but I suppose I should put a thing in there of you actually have to constantly think about that. Because if you just say, oh, I want to be in there in 5 years and you don't think about it again for 6 months, you're not doing much with it.
Where do you want to be in 5 years later?
Right now, I actually have no idea. There are thoughts on probably going back to another startups, to do another startup from Engineer One, possibly consulting, specifically with startups again and just getting multiple startups off the ground. Maybe I'll still be with Cubiko in 5 years because honestly, it's a pretty good place. So that's kind of where I'm at the moment. I don't actually know yet, but there are options there.
Between sort of the junior, intermediate, and then senior, and then the other two levels, is it usual that that kind of role sort of stays with you in that sort of time period, or is it common to, like, if you were to switch to another company or another like way of developing something, that you
So side motions.
Yes.
Yeah. So if you're wanting to change disciplines or change what you're working on, it's a very big, depends how much overlap you have. If you're going from, if you've been working in object-oriented your whole life and then you say, right, here's a functional program, here's a Haskell job over here. Oh crap, they're not going to hire you as a senior because you don't know it and because Haskell and that sort of level of functional programming is difficult to learn. So they might say, okay, you can already code and you can code well. You need to learn this, this, and this. Okay, we're going to bring you as an intermediate for now with the expectation that in 1 year's time you will be a senior, and in that time you have to meet this goal, this goal, this goal. And there's other places where you can side grade and it doesn't matter. You can code, we know you can code. It's a language, yes, it's not. You can code in Java and the job's in C#. They're basically the same language. So that's like, okay, yes, you don't know that specific language, but it's not going to take much for you to upgrade. So it's a very, it depends how far you're going. There is a point to be made here that if you can solve problems, you can go and do whatever the hell you want pretty quickly. So if you want to really concentrate on learning things, figure out how you work, figure out how to solve problems better, figure out how to learn faster. No more? All right, last one, we'll go here.
I had a rumour that the industry was starting to shift away from agile and back towards conventional waterfall. Is there any truth to that?
Look, there's always people that want to sell you on something. If you're working in, maybe this is a question for people who work in consulting, because consultants, as a general thing for a while, consultants have been time and materials. So yes, you're paying each engineer at 4 times their cost rate, but you're doing it for this many hours, and if the project's not done at the end, then, well, you better pay our engineers some more, or pay us some more. There is a possibility that it's going in a way of, okay, this is the bit of work that I've scoped for you, go do this. But I honestly don't see that sticking for too long, because every single project that you bring consultants in for software, the scope will change within the first month. As you work on it and suddenly you understand the problem where you go, I don't actually need 90% of that, I want you to work on this instead. This is the budget. So I don't see it happening personally. Maybe it's happening in some small sections, but it's not going to last too long. All right, we'll do it.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Logan. It was very interesting to hear about sort of how everything sort of maps out and your perspective on the individual roles as well. As a getting it from hello YouTube. As a token of our appreciation at UQCS Hub, thank you very much for coming along.